Hello, John.
How are you, Jake?
All right. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Your audio is
Okay.
fantastic.
All right.
Um, Wonderful to have you here, and I apologize for failing to get the link over to you properly. I'm gonna do a little bit of an introduction to you by way of how we met the first time, and then I think as our conversation unfolds, people are going to learn a lot more about your background and, of course, the work that you're engaged in now. So, if that is okay with you, we'll get started.
That's okay.
Fantastic. Well, I think everyone, it was 5 or 6 years ago that I got a phone call from Jake. And it's a phone call that initially appeared very similar to ones that I'd received many times before. Someone was interested in putting together a conference focused on accessible travel. And I'd heard this story many times before. Many folks had been interested in um, developing an event that would focus on many of the real issues that disabled people encounter in travel and to try to propose solutions to those for the industry to benefit from. Um, but I soon learned that Jake actually had a background in putting incredible tourism related conferences together. And he shared with me that he had recently sold his travel event business. Jake, you'll have to remind me to whom you sold it to. But I realized then that this guy, Jake Steinman, really had the ability to put something together. And so I was very excited that he had turned to me and others in the community for guidance on exactly how we should move forward. Try to get um, a pulse of the disabled travel community. Uh, Jake, you have shared a story many times, but not to this audience, about what led you to the idea to found TravelAbility. And I think that people would really get a kick out of hearing that story and the award that you were presented with.
So my office is based in Sausalito, which is a kind of a small but well-known suburb outside of San Francisco, just on the other side of the bridge. And in late 2018, I received an email from the city of Sausalito proclaiming my company, which was North America, it's called North American Journeys Travel Agent of the Year. And I, I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm really honored, and I would be a lot more honored if I was a travel agent. And but we weren't travel agents. We'd never planned travel for anyone. And so I didn't think much of it. But during the course of the next 4 or 5 months, while I was negotiating the sale of my other assets, which were, some media and other events in the travel industry, people started showing up on my doorstep asking for help planning travel, and half of them had someone with a disability that they were planning travel for. It was either a spouse or a daughter or a son, someone, it was a relative that really was just stuck and didn't know what to do. And after about the third one, it dawned on me, I tried to help them, and I couldn't find anything on accessible disability travel. And I looked at, and so so I was about to basically sell these, my assets in this company, and I didn't really need, I wasn't going to miss any meals, and this looked like, this might be something good for me to get into as a give back. And so I went on a month-long listening tour where I researched, a handful of bloggers. It was basically John, Corey Lee, Sylvia Longmire, and a few others with other disabilities. And then there were, some other, there were open doors, and so I had somebody do a white paper on what was available, and I sent one of my team members to Brussels to this Destinations for All conference. She brought back, 30 pounds of brochures and things that what was going on around the world that was pretty government focused mostly. And then I went on this listening tour and talked to, we had a lot of contacts where we differ from the disability and advocacy groups that have kind of tried to pursue this. Is we had the contacts in the travel industry already. They already knew us, and so we could, at least get their attention. They would read our emails, and so I started to call some of the leaders that I knew in the hotel industry, the destination industry, attractions, Disney. These were, we had about 700 clients in the travel industry that were buying things from us. And so it ended up to be 53 people. And then I realized that, I came to the conclusion that there were basically three mindsets of the people I spoke with. And one was a mindset around fear and compliance, and that was hotels, mostly because there's been a lot of publicity about lawsuits and litigation. And the other mindset was a mindset of the idealist, and it wasn't fully altruistic, but those were the museums who um, were largely the most accessible of any of the businesses that we found. And I learned it was because a lot of it was because any museum that's getting government grants has to have an ADA coordinator. And that ADA coordinator basically spends a portion, they have other jobs there, but they spend a lot of their time trying to be accessible. And then the other thing is they see mostly residents in their communities. And so they're seeing people in school groups, senior groups, women's clubs that come through there. And so they see accessibility all the time. It's nothing new to them. Whereas the hotel industry, the general managers, the people that are making decisions, they never see it because it comes to the front desk, and they don't see anything unless there's a lawsuit or a complaint. So, and then the third mindset that I came across was this mindset of growth, and that was the destination tourism boards. And their job is to be the canary in the coal mine and tell their industry what's coming next. And this is really, so if they see that there's going to be some huge trend in digital marketing, for example, which we had a conference around in like the 2000 aughts, and just which was starting. They would inform all of their hotels, the hotels, attractions, all their business partners about this, and then they would come to conferences and learn about it, and then tell them about it. So that's just kind of the model there that I know about and I had experience with. So we are looking at, after this sort of listening tour, it dawned on me that one way to convince them to basically become more accessible is really to relate it to baby boomers, people like me, who are antique, who are aging into, So I started to look into the research around baby boomers, and I found this basically a mother lode of information that supported the fact that if you're accessible for people who are disabled today, it's like aging is like a form of disability on the installment plan. And if you're accessible for those people who are disabled today, you're basically putting it, it's like whatever you invest, whatever time you invest, whatever money you invest, whatever creativity you invest, whatever thought you invest, it's like a down payment on what's going to be needed tomorrow. So this is kind of what John's referring to, is just that we've been able to, so we created this conference, and in 2019 that John spoke at, and he's spoken at each one ever since. So we didn't do anything through 2020, and I realized that what I did realize, really talking to everyone with disabilities, and I'm assuming I'm already telling you something you already know, is that when you're at home, your home is set up for your needs, and you probably know, and you have a little bubble of a village of where you can go, um, the grocery store, the drugstore, the cleaners, um, and so you're set up for that village. But when you travel, there's just no information. And the lack of information basically forces people with disabilities to be detectives. And sometimes it takes longer to plan the trip than it does to take the trip. And so I could see that, our job was really to convince as many destinations as possible, and have them turn around and convince their hotels and their attractions to put as much information online as they can. So the first thing we did in 2020 is we started to research these landing pages. And these landing pages are really basically a content page of what's accessible, links to different museums, links to, attractions, and, basically, what they could do, somebody with a disability could do in that destination, with links to where they could do it. And so we started out researching it, and I had two interns researching it for about 5 weeks, and it took them, and they found a total of 30 out of 165 destinations. They would type in, they would look at their website first, and almost no one had an easily found a landing page on the website. We had to go in and type in accessible things to do for, in X, in 165, cities and the states. Anyway, the upshot is they found, I think, 23 cities and 15 states that had landing pages, and most of the destinations didn't even know they had them. We found them through just a Google search, and they weren't on their website. They're buried somewhere 16 layers down on their website. So we started with that, and then we created a newsletter, and a monthly newsletter to try to give them, we had a mailing list of about 12,000 people and in the industry, and that newsletter was all about how, we hardly had anybody from the disability community, and it was all people that were in the business side of it. And so we ended up, out of those 12,000, we had a steady readership of about 3,300 every month. And those were the ones. And then we were working through that newsletter to educate them. And that led to the creation of a playbook, which John is well aware of. And this is a kind of like accessibility in a box, is what it's like. And we distribute it through these destinations, and they can share it with their hotels, attractions, restaurants, anybody that to help educate them about accessibility. And then we also created kind of a Shark Tank event called the Innovatable Pitch Fest, and where we this year it was, so it's held on the 26th of July, which is the annual anniversary of the passage of the ADA, and that's the semifinals. And so each year we have about 10 companies that present there, and in the Shark Tank format with a panel. And John has been on that panel several times. And I, you know, and I realized that, you know, that so many of these products and these innovations and technologies really can fill the gap between what's needed and what's really available. And so, you know, so we developed that. We had our own podcast for a while that we sponsored. And then we aggregated all those landing pages, so the result was that there were 35 landing pages. Now there are 183 in covering the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and the Caribbean, and we're moving into Europe this time. So that's really kind of a nutshell. But I did want to tell you that a friend of mine suggested that I go back to the city of Sausalito and just tell them what that bogus award led to. You know, all these projects that really benefit people with disabilities and humanity in general. And it's why I've become passionate about it. So I did that. And I went to the city manager and I told him about all these projects, just like I'm telling you. And he looked at me like I was from Mars, and he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. We don't give awards like that. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, we don't. He said, wait a minute. Did that come in the form of an email? And I said, yes, it did. He said, did it have a link for an offer that you could buy a plaque, put up on your wall that you were travel agent of the year? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, it did. And he said, that was a credit card scam. And so I realized, so this is the way the universe basically conspires to basically bring you into a situation you would never have been in before. I probably, who knows where I would have been, but this is the most passionate thing I've ever been involved in. And because it's so you know, the work, getting people to do this kind of work in the travel industry is really contagious. And the passion, you know, it grows into, you know, awareness, and then it grows into a passion. And so John has been someone who's been providing guidance, you know, kind of keeping me from myself and just some of my other instincts. And because I knew nothing about accessibility early on, and I was just impressed with what he's been able to do, and so I'm very fortunate that I had all those contacts in the travel industry, where the disability industry didn't have, you know, they didn't have that, and it's very hard to get into it. So anyway, that's my story.
Yeah, Jake. Well, yeah, a couple things. I maybe should have interrupted you, but it was so good, and I'm glad that you shared all of that. I think maybe I'll speak to the last point that you made there first, and that is all of the contacts that you brought into the equation. For years, I've been reaching out to destination marketing organizations, cold calling them and saying, hey, I'd like to help you put accessibility to the forefront of your work, have information appear on your website. Look at this travel guide that I just wrote for your city on mine. If you would publish this information on your own website, you could put mine out of business. Now, I don't necessarily want to go out of business, But I do want this information to be more widely shared because the reality of it is I'm never going to reach every wheelchair user or person with a disability in the world. I have a small slice of the community, and many of my readers are very loyal. I see some people on the chat whose names have been in my inbox repeatedly for years since I started the website, and maybe others who are newer to this community. And that's all very exciting. But the reality is I did a study in 2020 called the Accessible Travel Study. And next week, or maybe at the end of this week, if I get on the ball with the final preparations, I'm going to be launching the 2024 Accessible Travel Study. But in that 2020 study, one of the things that I was trying to figure out was, where are disabled people getting their information when it comes to travel, and what information is still lacking that they need? And a lot of it is what is, going on through the Accessible Landing Page Project. The landing page project, for everyone here who hasn't seen it, is a page on the TravelAbility website that links to the accessibility pages on each of the destination websites that have them. And there's been tremendous progress on the part of the TravelAbility summits, encouraging destinations to get to work. I mean, some have invested a lot more time and effort into theirs than others. But at the end of the day, I've called the accessibility landing page, or any accessibility information on a business website, is sort of the welcome mat. It's the gateway to getting people interested in the business, the place to visit, wherever it may be. Because if you go to a website, and maybe it looks like an inaccessible place, it looks like an inaccessible restaurant, and there's no information that clearly tells me that it's accessible, I'm going to assume that it's not. And it's sad that, we are in that spot still, all these years after the ADA, where inaccessibility is the default assumption. So we still need this information. Maybe one day, hopefully sooner rather than later, everything will be accessible and we won't have to worry about this anymore. But that's still a long way off. But there's just been so much growth in the sharing of information in pretty spectacular ways, not only for people with disabilities who have mobility challenges, but also, I think one area that you have been tracking, Jake, very closely, and that I've been able to benefit from and sort of being in the ecosystem, is focus on people with sensory disabilities. There's been tremendous investments made. Yesterday, or day before yesterday, I was in the Pittsburgh airport, and they actually have a sensory friendly room that is developed to give kids and adults with autism a place to find a refuge in the chaotic environment that's the airport. But we've also seen, and I think that we covered this on the TravelAbility Insider newsletter, when Alaska Airlines developed a mobile application to help guide people with sensory challenges sort of through the travel experience, so they would know what to expect. A lot of these things have been inspired by the work and conversations that are going on at the TravelAbility Summit. And I think that there's one example in northeastern Florida. I'm forgetting the name of the city. It's a beach town south of Jacksonville. Amelia Island. This might have been at the second TravelAbility Summit in Tampa. Right. And there was a representative from the Amelia Island Tourism Board there. And we sort of showed what sort of information is part of an accessible landing page. His destination didn't have any of that. And he shared something with you, got on the phone with you, I think, the next day. Maybe you could talk about that conversation and what
Yeah,
happened, Jake?
that this was actually at the conference itself during a break. He came up to me and said, we don't have a landing page. And so just the what's involved. And I said, well, I said, I can, send you a link to what we're doing, or, some of the landing pages already. But on the flight home, uh, I just typed in accessible things to do on Amelia Island. And I found a 3-day weekend story by Sylvia Longmire, another one of the bloggers that I followed. And she had done an extensive, and it was with, included, attractions, experiences, cafes, restaurants, and, reviewing all the accessibility, all the things that she could do. And I think she just did this on her own. It had nothing to do with the bureau, with the tourism bureau. And so on the on the flight home, this was, like the day after we discussed it, I just started to look, uh, click on all the, just look up the URLs for all of the things all the places that she went to. And, and basically, and then and I organized them all into an email to this guy. And I said, and then I, looked up, accessible transportation on Amelia Island, and then wheelchair rentals. And within probably an hour, 90 minutes, I had, the bones of a landing page. And I said, here's, so I just emailed it to him while I was in flight. And the next day, this is what I'm talking about. People get really excited. Within 24 hours, he had the designer and the marketing person actually turn those links into an accessible landing page. And if I could do that with him, with 90 minutes and whatever he did, we were able to show destinations how actually easy it was. They actually had all the information through John, through some of the places John was, visited. So, and so they can just take, these different links from things from the destinations and create their own landing pages. And we started to encourage that, and that's how we got to so many we have now. And then the other thing that they're worried about is, perfection. They just, they're worried about getting complaints and, these things. And what I learned is every single disability has a spectrum, and two people can be using the same wheelchair and the same, but they have completely different needs. One can stand and walk 10 meters, the other can't do that at all. And so so you're never going to be perfect for everyone. But anyway, that's what I learned. I wanted to tell you, I've always been a little disappointed in the ADA, just like you are. And but I was in London last week, and I went to the Blue Badge Awards, and this is an annual award ceremony where this woman puts this event on, and it's about, the best accessibility, the most accessible restaurant, the most accessible hotel, the most accessible bar, the most accessible spa. She must have had like 15 different awards of things. And then she did this sort of awards about the ludicrous loo, and the worst bathroom. And then she did something on the worst ramp. Anyway, she created these awards, And as these people were getting up, and as she spoke, and she talked about the fact that, she wanted to go to a Michelin star restaurant, and she called them and they said, oh yeah, we're accessible. We're fully accessible, and you come right in. We welcome you. And she got there, and there were 2 steps to get to the place. And then, so they had these four, she was talking about how they had these 4 brutes that were servers that were carrying her up the 2 stairs. And she sat, so she went to the table, and they started to, order. And then she had to use the bathroom. And her wheelchair, the hallway was so narrow, she couldn't get her wheelchair through the hallway. And it made me appreciate, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but it really made me appreciate the ADA that we have here, because as bad as it is, and and the situation is, there's so many old buildings there, and it's so expensive to renovate that a lot of things don't get renovated. And here, there's been so much built. They have an ADA law since 1999. They have this law, is totally unenforceable, doesn't get enforced. And so, but the accessibility is just catch as catch can. You can't rely on anything. And so it really made me appreciate the ADA, because and they were there, and and every single speaker, there's a hotelier there who's really the most accessible person. The hotelier, he's got 200 hotels, and he built the Brooklyn Hotel, which is a fully accessible, brand new build. But his other hotels are not accessible at all. It's too expensive to create, he was telling me. And but he's disabled. He has a cane, and it's clear he has some form of mobility issues. So he has the lived experience to understand to do this. But anyway, so but I'm just it made me appreciate the fact that we have this, and that there have been so many new hotels built since 1990, 89, whenever that was, and there's so many renovations that have taken place, that we have it better than they do. And because it's really, it's you've just got to follow a number of different bloggers and figure out what they're doing, and just go with reviews, because there's no reliability for anything there.
Right, right.
I think
So
you find
Jake,
that yourself.
yeah, exactly. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have here in the US is consistency. We have a standard, but sort of a draw of straws in terms of seeing what you're going to get precisely. And that's why the information is so important. I've got a few questions here in the chat box, and I would like to open it up to people, um, if you're willing to take questions, Jake. One of the questions that I got here, and I think I should have led with this, but we were starting off a little late, is sort of what really was the target audience for this call? Well, it is everyone. Everyone is the target audience. You know, the situation is such that I go to TravelAbility has had 4 events now. And the Destinations for All World Summit in Brussels that you were talking about earlier, I was at. You weren't there, Jake, otherwise we could have met in person. And so many other events across the travel industry that I attend, but they're not events that are designed for the traveling public. They are for the industry. But I wanted to have this call with Jake because this is as close a conference as we are going to see or have seen within the travel industry, that is focused on accessibility. Oftentimes I'll go to an aviation conference and I lead a panel on accessible air travel. but that's just one session among many. Um, and so it is very important, I think, for there to be an event that is trying to educate members of the travel industry, in this case, primarily destination marketing organizations, how they can be involved in working towards creating more accessible communities. And so I think that's why I wanted to bring Jake here to showcase how that infrastructure for that advocacy and the promotion of best practices has been created and how it's working and moving forward. And I think there have been some tremendous successes brought about through TravelAbility. Many folks, well, from destinations all around the country and in Canada, have attended. We've also had attendees from some of the major hotel groups, cruise lines, advocacy organizations as well are represented. So I think it is a really important conversation to have. I do want to look into some of these questions. One thing, and we have Jake, you can maybe speak to this a little bit. I believe they were part of the Pitch Fest, the Sunflower Lanyard program.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Could you speak to them? And they have been very involved in attending TravelAbility summits over the years, and have been given a platform to showcase that solution to destinations all around the country.
Yeah, so the Sunflower Lanyard is basically a kind of an opt-in lanyard to wear that indicates that you require some more time or additional support in some way, and as a person with a hidden disability. And so but in order to have that become effective, it involves, you have to train the people in the airports and all the other places that, but now it's appearing in not only in airports, but it's appearing in convention centers. It's appearing in event venues, like concerts and trade shows. And so they actually go in as part of the lanyard. I think the lanyard sells for like 80 cents to $1 to the destination, whoever it's using. And but the training that comes with it is what's really important. So they're training for hidden disabilities that range from anywhere from autism spectrum disorder to dementia to hard of hearing to blindness. Blindness is not exactly hidden, but a lot of so that's really a lot of progress in that area. And so the what accessibility involves is really getting information out there, putting the information out there, and then it involves these three layers of and then it involves training at a certain level, sensitivity training, and kind of understanding what what people with different disabilities really need when they travel, and and so that's what we try to do. And the reason we work with destination marketing organizations is because it's kind of a grassroots approach, because they're the ones that have the relationships in their cities with the hotels and the attractions and the museums and the restaurants and the tour companies. And their job is to educate them about, so they often do training. And so we work with people that have like training modules, and so that they can develop. So we're kind of working at it from the grassroots area. And I don't attend any of the major disability conferences, mostly because it's just the small. It's just two people here, myself and Trish, really, and then we have some contract people, but I don't have the bandwidth to go to them, and I don't belong there anyway because I'm really focused on the travel industry, not on that. So anyway, I don't feel I've earned the right to go. So just but I think focusing on, like the advocacy groups are doing a great job of advocating for what is needed in travel because it's just so obvious that there's so much lacking. But there's been a lot of progress made that that didn't exist, when I started in like 2021. Um, I think we were in 2021. I think you were on a panel in Florida, right, with me, and
Oh, yes, I was at the governor's conference.
that the governor's conference in Florida, and I cajoled John to go, and Josh Loeb, so a bunch of people to be on this panel, and there were 600 people at that conference, and we're in this giant room, and there are 15 people that attended, and I thought, it was really, it was
Disheartening, I think.
this is very disheartening to see that. But now I go to these conferences, and there's like 200 people interested in in these accessibility breakouts, and it's
And
a big it's so there's a lot of awareness that didn't exist a few years ago.
and I
So
I I do think, Jake, there is sort of a shifting of the tide. In the last couple weeks, I've been talking with a number of destinations who um, want me to come and deliver a keynote speech on accessibility at their annual conferences for their business partners and stakeholders. Um, and so I do think that's something that wouldn't have happened before the pandemic. And I think there really has been a shift into understanding, particularly among destination marketing organizations who used to make their money on driving. One of their primary focuses was not on, attracting Joe tourists to the destination, but it was actually attracting, Joe Incorporated to have their annual event, their annual, meeting or conference. And as we've seen with, Zoom that we're on right now, that has eliminated the need for a lot of in-person events, and the business travel market has not fully recovered post-pandemic. Meanwhile, the leisure travel market is, better than it's ever been. So much so that, airlines are adjusting schedules. They're dropping flights to formerly business markets and loading up on flights to Cancun and other and the Bahamas and such. Um, and so it is, there is a recognition that disabled people are a target market within the shifting demographics of who's traveling. And there's tremendous opportunity there. Um, and I think that's something that TravelAbility is really able to provide value in helping destinations that have never considered accessibility before, helping them get up to speed on where things are at, where they should start their journey to becoming a more accessible and inclusive destination. And I've been amazed with some conversations with DMOs in the last year or two. Not only are they wanting to put information on their websites, but they're wanting to play a role in the advocacy in their local communities. I've heard of a number of DMOs that said, we've engaged with our public transportation provider to help get greater accessibility incorporated into the system. There are DMOs that are financing IRA, which is a mobile application that connects blind people with a sighted guide through, effectively a Zoom call. Um, and I think that's tremendous development that we're seeing. Happy to be on the advisory board of TravelAbility and be able to work with Jake and the larger team of people that um, are really from all sectors of the industry, and so many people with disabilities themselves as well. So it's not as if you have a travel conference with a couple of token disabled people on the board. We are everywhere. We ran out of accessible hotel rooms at the conference this year, at the conference hotel. So that is really exciting. Um, I
And
see.
then,
Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead, Jake.
So talking about, I just wanted to, I know we just have a limited time for questions, but I wanted to address the thing about the question about meetings. And so what has happened is there are now hybrid working situations where teams are really going in uh, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, or they don't go in at all. And then what happens is, and then I spoke with Salesforce. They have an employee research group called Abilities Force, and the woman that was in charge of that told me about all the travel support they offer. They offer, a companion, they offer, free, whatever they need, and they'll do the booking and they'll do all, and they still can't get people they have a lot of people with disabilities working there because they get government grants, and if you're getting government, they're government contracts. If you're getting a government contract, you have to have X number of people with disabilities as part of that proposal. And she was telling me, she said, no, they don't want to travel. They're not traveling to these offsites, where we have offsites to sort of build morale and build relationships and network with everybody, that they don't get to see each other. And she says it's impeding their ability to advance and their ability to get promoted. And and that really struck me because now we're focusing on how to create welcome meetings and all these other, and they didn't want to travel because of their lived experience traveling for leisure was so onerous. So anyway, we're involved in that end of it now. So I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I remember hearing about that. Where was the last Savannah, in Savannah, Georgia, back in August. So what I would like to do now, if anyone in the chat has a question for Jake, I'd love you to come on board. I see a lot of discussion in the chat about cruises and other things. Um, and I will preface this with the fact that I think next week I'll just do an AMA where you can come on and ask me any travel related questions. And maybe I'll get another accessible travel expert on here as well, so that we can, sort of go at all of these generalized travel questions. Definitely value in those, not discounting them at all. I know they're important to your travel journeys. But if you have any questions for Jake in the work and advocacy within the travel industry, or have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. So you can unmute yourself and ask away. Oh, hi,
I
Julie.
have a question. Hi. First, I just want to thank you for doing this, John and Jake. This is an amazing amount of really great information. I'm not a travel agent or anything like that, but regardless, I've just keep jotting down everything, all these little tips that I've heard. Jake, I'm in Alameda, so it's happy to hear that you're just over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And what an amazing story. And again, thank you for your passion. you're going to be taking us to long, far away places. So I'm happy about that. As far as within the travel, the question that you asked, I mean, even sometimes just booking a hotel room, when you ask for an accessible room, I've learned that there's no definition to the person behind the desk of what exactly that means. I've asked sometimes to have a zero entry, like not a tub, a shower without a tub. I'm promised an accessible room. I have photographs of some of these accessible rooms that you you would just laugh to see what they think is an accessible situation. So I don't know. I'm just curious as to how to get a definition of, and people have different needs within what they mean by an accessible room. I understand that as well. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, this is why it's so unfair, because you have to be detectives, which means you've got to call the front desk, whoever's answering the phone, and have them ask somebody, in the engineering department or someone to go to that specific room that they want to give you and see if it has the bed height you want, and see if you have, and it's a huge layer of additional information that you have to endure that's unfair. And so have John, I'm going to bring up Wheel the World, okay, because Wheel the World it's like some hybrid between a dating site and an accessible booking engine for hotels. And what they do is so for example, Julie, you would go in, and like a dating site, you put in your profile, only you'd put in what you need from a hotel, the dimensions of your wheelchair, the height, how far you can, how far you can walk, can you stand, so they have all that, and the founder is a wheelchair user, so he fully understands what the needs are, and then on the other side, they send TaskRabbit people into 2,000 hotels around the world, I think in 50 cities, and they have an app, and these TaskRabbit people are trained to measure 200 data points in the entryway, the common space, the entrance, the bathrooms, the sleeping rooms, all these different areas. And the net result is that when you go in and use their booking engine, they basically turn up the rooms that the search in the city will just turn up the hotels in order of what they have that most meet your needs. So here's one that's fully accessible, here's one, and they guarantee the rooms, and they actually put the room numbers in there. So it's a very it's a very labor intensive process. And so I've been involved with them because I've been introducing them to destinations, so that so that these destinations can become more accessible, because they have all the information, and so they'll have that information on their website and stuff. So anyway, so I wanted to bring that up, and
I'm
that's
sorry,
just
John, could you say the name of what you were talking about? Was it
it's called
Yeah,
Wheel the World.
Wheel the World? Okay. And that's
Yeah,
an
Wheel the
app
World.
or a website?
It's
Oh,
an app.
.com. Okay,
Yeah,
an app. Okay,
yeah. It's a website and
okay.
an app.
Website, got it. I
and
apologize to the group. I actually have to leave for a 5 o'clock appointment, but I'm glad this was being recorded, and thank you for answering. I'll listen as long as I can.
Okay,
absolutely.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you for joining in, Julie. It's a
Thank
pleasure to see you.
Yeah,
Um,
and I know you're in Boston, and I'm a Terriers, a BU grad, so Nice to
Oh,
see you
wow.
on Zoom, John.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was on the UMass Boston campus earlier today because I was going to the JFK Presidential Library um,
Oh,
to
isn't that great?
survey its accessibility. I think I had been there once before, but maybe very quickly. So today I went on a full guided tour, and it was lovely. I, of course, as I always do when I leave somewhere, I have some recommendations that can improve access, but overall, it was a really great event. And yeah, anyway, um, I a couple of interesting. So Linda, I think I see your comment here in the chat. And really what we've been talking about is the TravelAbility Summit, Jake's founding of that, and the work that we're doing to advocate for destinations to become partners in this accessibility journey, rather than just observers. Like, we need to have them engaged to promote access and be part of the coalition in bringing greater accessibility. I say all of the time that I think that accessible travel and accessible travel advocacy starts locally. So Boston is my home now. I'm trying to be very involved in connecting with people around accessibility here in the city. And I encourage all of you to do that in your own home cities, because if we can advocate for greater access and access to information about accessibility in the places where we live, it automatically becomes more accessible to people who would be visiting. Pamela, I see you've
Oh,
raised
hi,
your
John.
hand.
John, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Linda.
Oh, yes, Linda.
Yeah, I
Hi.
totally agree with you. It's just, I'm noticing as I travel that, other than doing a lot of research, which I'm fine doing, the information is, I mean, it's just like a hotel room. The information is sporadic here or there. There's secrets that someone will tell you that, like, help me in Italy if you have a disability greater than 75%, and everyone in Italy has a card saying how disabled they are. You get into all of their places like the Colosseum and Uffizi Gallery and all those places for free, and you don't even have to line up, but you have to know these types of things. So I was just curious if the work that's being done, if it's sort of like a meta, or like I don't mean meta as in Facebook, but meta website where we could suggest websites that have been helpful for us when we visited a certain country. That's where I was going with my question.
So I think that right now, what our focus is on is trying to get individual destinations to publish guides to accessibility and link to resources maybe that are not their own. I know there are a lot of DMOs around the world that have linked to things that I've written on my website that prove helpful to people.
Yeah.
And so we definitely need more of that collaboration between DMOs. In that sense, I mean, like, Visit New York or something.
Yeah.
And the community at large. And ultimately, hopefully, we get DMOs to share this knowledge with all of the businesses and museums and hotels in their local community. Because as Jake was saying earlier, I'm not sure when you came in, on
it was about
his
10
team.
after.
Yeah, it's him and Trisha. His I don't know, Jake, what is her actual she's like jack of all trades. She does everything.
She's like the marketing, she does the market. She's like an operations, she's sort of an operations person and I'm the idea person.
Ah,
And but I think what you're talking about is really, your audience is really, they're the secret shoppers of this whole scenario. And if there's a way to sort of get them to really talk about, and I think there's just a lot of things that can't be done, but our motto has been like rethinking accessibility. It's not what you can't do, it's what you can do.
I totally concur. But
And
see, you guys
and
have the ADA Act, which does, I'm Canadian, so you guys have the ADA Act. I was there when it was incorporated because my best friend was physically disabled, and it does have rules in it. And so you can say to a hotel, you're not following these rules. We don't have that in Canada. Or I just came from Italy and it was just a nightmare in Italy with accessible rooms. So
Sure.
that's why I'm asking, I'd be happy to contribute to say, this is where I was, this was a good hotel, that type of thing. But it's really hard to find that information out unless you're physically meeting there, like you talked about the Cass Rabbit people.
Yeah, and so
well,
Linda,
yeah,
I sorry, Jake, if I could just say, so I get probably once a month, someone comes to me, usually it's a university student or someone who has just recently graduated, and they say, I want to create the Yelp for accessibility. And I hear this all the time.
Yep.
The problem with all of these different apps and there have been many that have been
Yep.
developed, is that they end up being very localized.
Yep.
So the person is able to get a lot of contribution from their community, but not far beyond that.
Yep.
I think I believe Access Now in Canada has been pretty successful.
Yep.
But really it is about getting people on board to share information.
Correct.
And it has been very difficult. And I'm not calling anyone out here, but I've been begging readers for years since I started the website. I'm like, I'm one guy, I'm one perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I would love it if you would write a guest article to share the experience from your recent trip to wherever. And those are so rarely submitted. Now I understand it's not a paid opportunity. Maybe that's my fault. This website doesn't make a lot of money.
I have a software background as a product manager, so I know where you're going. I understand this.
Yeah, it's a tough nut to crack.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that, it'll be easier to crowdsource information. I know Google's providing a lot of basic information. We've had them present. Sasha from Google's accessibility team has presented at TravelAbility. And I've found the Google Maps app very helpful, especially living here in Boston, an older city where not every one of the older buildings has been made accessible, to know whether or not I can actually get in. I might not be able to get a lot of information beyond that, but it's very helpful. And yeah, but I completely hear you, Linda. I agree that there's a need.
Well,
Thank you.
so one of the things that we're doing are these pilot programs with destinations. So we have this Destination Ally Club of about 18 destinations that have signed up for it, and they agree to a commitment about accessibility for them for the next 3 years, that they're going to really focus on it as one of their pillars. And part of that is real. So we create pilot programs, and one of our programs was this thing called Rethinking Accessibility. It's not what you can't do, it's what you can do. And we gave them a survey to send out to their attractions and not hotels, but just to the attractions on what they had, different features that they had for people who had disabilities. And there were 5 destinations that opted into that pilot program, and they uncovered the collectively 210 new features that were added to their website, their accessible landing pages. And our next this year, we're going to introduce another one called Heads in Accessible Beds, where they're going to go to hotels. They're each going to try to get 10 hotels to go in and measure the height of the beds in each of their ADA rooms, and they will put that information up on their website so that people at least know whether the bed height is right for them. And so I think the approach we're using is a very positive one. And then I don't know if your readers are familiar with accessible journeys, John. If they're that this is
I've included a couple of mentions of that, but yeah, please go ahead and share.
So we started Accessible Journeys in the spring of 2022, and it's a magazine and I have a publishing partner who's a publisher, and she created this magazine, Accessibility for All. And anyway, so it started, and the first issue had 870 readers. And I thought, why even bother? With so few readers, and it was and it was all digital, but since then, she has really figured out how to attract a lot of readers. And so I just we didn't look at it for a while. I didn't look at the logs, but the last 2 issues have had 1.75 million, and the last one had 1.83 million in the readers. It's a huge readership. And it's because she has she focuses on she has a guest editor every quarter who focuses on a different disability. And it's not what you would think. So the current issue is rheumatoid arthritis, for example, and she'll have 20 or 30 people writing about how they travel with rheumatoid arthritis. And then the rest of it, there's another 100 pages of blog posts, summaries of about 40 different bloggers with different disabilities. And then there are other articles all about things they can, about travel. And it's turned into the positive approach that she took is really, it reads kind of like a fashion magazine of some kind. Attractive people doing, who have disabilities that are doing unique things and that are traveling. And so it's really caught on. And it's because she has a database now of about 340 bloggers and influencers, not travel oriented, but with different disabilities. And so they have, and she kind of features them in these little snippets in each issue, and they've been sharing it. And so it's really kind of caught on. So that's another thing that I think can be used by your readers. It has hardly any advertising in it. I mean, we just don't, it's really a labor of love. And but now since it has all these, the circulation, it's actually a viable thing, valuable thing for as a media. So I would suggest, and there's no way you have to find a link to it. There's no way to actually.
Jake, I've shared the link in the comments, so folks can find it there. And right. When I publish the recording of this, I always include links that were mentioned in the chat. So we'll definitely put that there as well. I know we're over on time, but Pamela has had her hand raised for a while. And so, Pamela, if you have a question, I'd love to invite you to ask it.
Okay, thank you. I have lots and lots of things I'd like to talk about, John. And you mentioned that you would have another session where we could get more into the weeds about what's accessible and what isn't, and why, and what solutions maybe we can come up with. I just came back from London and I had this, the same problem that everyone has with the bed and the toilet and, finding a room and, oh, it was just, hard. But I wanted to say, John, I live in Boston and I'm actually a docent at the JFK Library and I wish I had been there when you were there.
Oh,
So
wow. What a
I would
small
love to
world.
meet you. Yeah. And I was going to ask you how to get in touch with you because since I am in Boston, I actually would like to meet you sometime and maybe we could go around and talk about things and I don't know, but I could show you around or we could,
I
whatever.
would love that. I would love
Yeah.
that. I
So,
will message you. Sorry, everyone. I don't give everyone my phone number, but I will find you in the chat here, Pamela, and give you my number.
yeah, do that. That would be fun. I'd love to, talk more.
One thing that I did want to mention, because I see we have a couple of founding members on here to my newsletter. Benefit of that membership is an hour chat with me each year if you subscribe at the founding member level. And not very many of the founding members have actually taken advantage of that. So I encourage you to do that. If you have a founding membership, schedule your call with me. I'd love to chat with you. If one of the times available on the calendar, doesn't work for you, there's an email that you can reach out to say, hey, this time would work better for me, and I'll do my best to accommodate. I am also going to host an AMA. Let's say next week. I gotta check my calendar because I know I'm going for a wedding down to Florida, and then the holidays are coming up. But I think, yeah, next week, it's Monday this week. So next week I'll do an AMA and we can talk about anything that's on your mind. Very much appreciate everyone who has attended today. Jake, if you have any last words, I'll leave it to you, but we're up on time, so I'd like to get things wrapped up.
Well, the only thing that I can say is I really appreciate all of you, attending this and having an opportunity to listen to some of your questions, because these questions really help me shape our conference and the areas that I see. One of the questions was around RV. Our accessible RVs, that we're going to look into that and have somebody with Campgrounds of America or somebody with that. There's a lot happening with the national parks on that front. I know, anyway, so it was, I learned as much as I think I imparted. So thank you everybody and thank you, John, for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure, Jake. I'm happy to finally introduce you to everyone. Been a long time coming, and I'm grateful that you shared the time. And I see there's more comments coming in about RVs. I think this is definitely an area that TravelAbility can look at in the future.
Yeah.
Something I've definitely paid a little attention to. Some of I took out Winnebago's Inspire RV a couple of years ago, and it's amazing accessibility. I recognize some of the challenges. Yeah, I've got an accessible RV, but I pull into an inaccessible campground. That's a problem. So, yeah, highlighting the accessibility that's out there, definitely an area of interest. Thank you all for coming. Such a pleasure to host these chats, and I'll be sending along details hopefully by the end of the week on my AMA next week. So take care, everyone. Thank you again, Jake. Have a great night.